right, y'all. If you would, hit that like and subscribe. It really helps me out. Let's get on to the story. So, I was about 8 years old, and I had this friend live down the road, and we got a really heavy snow one winter. I mean, it was a pretty good one. Over a foot of snow. And all the creeks were froze up. Well, I had just learned that you could get in the water when it's cold as long as you take all your clothes off and you have dry clothes to put back on when you get out, right? So like I said, I'm only like 8, maybe 9. And my mom lets us go outside and play. Well, I get on my bike. I didn't tell nobody. I got on my bike and I rode my bike down to my friend's house, who happened to live just about, a couple hundred yards away. But he lived closer to the creek. And so I was wanting to get in that creek. I was wanting to see if this would work, right? Like if I took all my clothes off and I got in the creek, when I got out, if I dried off, put my clothes back on, I'd be all right. Well, my buddy, the whole time, he's saying no. Don't do it. Don't do it. It's not going to work. Don't do it. It's not going to work. I'm like, I'm pretty sure it's going to work. You know what I mean? I think I read it in the Boy Scout handbook. That's where I got it from. It could have been an Army Ranger handbook, because I was into all those kind of books when I was little. Did a lot of reading when I was little. So, anyways, he gets on his bike. We go down the creek. He's trying to talk me out of it the whole time. I'm like, no, I'm doing it. I'm definitely going to do it. So, I stripped down. Now, luckily, he didn't do it. But I stripped down, and we had to break the ice to get in there. And I was just going to jump in, jump out. That's the way I understood that you did it. You just get in and get out and everything's cool. Dry off. Not cool. So I break the ice. He helps me. I jump in. When that cold water, you guys, and I'm little, so I have no control over my mind yet when it comes to, staying calm and not freaking out and all that. This is one of those lessons that taught me how to do that. But I hit that water, and when I got in that water, I couldn't get out. I like cramped up, seized up. Man, I couldn't move. So he had to get down by the creek, and he pulled me out of the creek. Now I'm naked. Because I'm thinking that's how you do it. You know what I mean? Which I guess it is now that I'm older, you do, but yeah, not the way I did it. And anyways, oh my goodness. He gets me out, and I'm trying to dry off, and I can't dry off. I can't even hardly put my clothes back on. He helps me get my clothes on, and by now, I mean, I'm having a hard time breathing. I can't move. I cannot move. I am locking up. And my buddy's freaking out. Now, luckily, he was a little bit older, so, he took control right away and put me on his bicycle and pushed me out of there. Up this big old hill and everything, all covered in snow. And I mean, I could just barely hold on to that bicycle and stay on there. And he pushed me to his house. And when I got to his house, his parents put me in their car and drove me up the road to my house. They had to carry me in. I mean, I was like icicle. My mom sees me. She's like, oh my goodness. Mom gets me. She goes and runs a cold bath of water, which I understand why now, but I didn't then. It made me mad. Why you put me in cold water? I'm freezing to death. So, anyways, she couldn't put me in hot water because it would have thrown me into shock. You know what I mean? And it would have burned real bad too. So I'm glad that didn't happen. I learned that when I got older too. But anyways, she thawed me out in the tub with cold water, cold tap water, and then kind of gradually warmed it up, warmed me up, got me out of it. I got sick, a little bit of a flu, but nothing serious, right? And I never did that again. so, so years go by, almost 20 probably. Everything seems to happen like in 20-year increments. Anyways, I was about 28, I think. Let me see. My son was 5. And he's 28 this month. So 23 years ago, I've got a trap line run, and I'm going to check this trap line. And my son wants to go. Well, there's snow on the ground. Some of the water has ice, but like anywhere where it's flowing, there's no ice. But it's pretty cold. There's probably 7, 8 inches of snow on the ground. And on this particular trap line, I only had 4 traps set because it wasn't a very long area that I could trap, but it was real gamey. It had a lot of beaver, and I knew that, you know, if I left the traps there long enough, I'd catch some beaver eventually. And that's what I was trapping was beaver. And I'd made this one set, and I'd caught an otter. It was my first otter. Now, this was before my son went with me. This is probably 3 or 4 days. 3 to 4 days before my son went with me, I'd caught this otter. So I was stoked. It was my first one, right? So I took it home and showed everybody. Well, my son thought it was super cool. So I'd went and checked my traps 3 or 4 days in a row. And like on the 4th day, we'll say, my son wants to go with me. I hadn't caught anything in the set I'd caught the otter in. It was just that one otter, no beavers, nothing. And I had it set for beavers, castor mound, the whole deal. And so this spot where this otter trap is, there's a big pool of water with a big rock up against the bluff. And I assume it looked like a good swimming hole. But off the back side of this big pool of water was like a little slough. So like when it would flood, it would wash back up in there a little bit. And then the creek that come down into that pool of water, the creek wasn't probably 4 foot wide. And I could see where the beaver were swimming right along the bank in that narrow part of the river because the gravel was always clean right there from where their bellies was rubbing. Kept it clean. So I had traps set there, and I was catching beaver in those spots. But I saw that little slough, and I thought, well, that'd probably be a good spot to try to catch one too, you know what I mean? They swim up through there, try to get up into the trees and chew on some bark, get them a little grub, you know? And so I set that trap, caught an otter. Now I can see my trap from the bank, this side of the creek. My trap's on that side of the creek, off by that blue hole off back of the corner of it. So what I would do normally was just walk up the creek where I could cross the creek, walk back through there, around the swimming hole and into that slough, check the trap, right? Well, I could see it, and it wasn't there. And I was like, oh man, where's my trap? I caught something, it got away. Well, it's cabled off. right? So the trap's right there somewhere. I'm pretty sure it's right there somewhere. Okay, so first off, doesn't do any good to use cables or chain if you don't cable or chain it to something that's not going to get pulled out of the ground like I did. So I'm standing there. I got my little 5-year-old son with me. He's all bundled up, looking like a marshmallow. And I'm like, dang, Bill, my trap's gone. I caught something and it took off with my trap. And so I'm looking the bank over real good. I'm looking through the trees, everywhere I can look. And I'm like, all right, stay right here. I cross the creek. I go up into the slough. My trap's nowhere up in there. I'm like, do you see it in the creek anywhere, son? He's like, no. I only see your other traps, Dad. And I'm like, all right, because I'd pointed them out. There's a beaver trap. There's a beaver trap. But that trap's gone. So I'm looking around. I think, well, maybe it got loose and it's over by that big rock or something, you know. So I'm looking over by the rock. Now this water, you guys, I don't know, it's probably about a 10-foot hole right there. But this water was clear, crystal clear water. You could see the bottom. All the way across, you could see the bottom in this little swimming hole. And so I look down in that swimming hole, and there's my trap with an otter in it. Right in the middle. Like, I'm pretty sure it was the deepest spot. Well, you guys, when I was catching otters, these otters were going for a couple $100 a piece. And well, let's just say my trap wasn't cheap neither. So there was no way I'm leaving my otter and my trap in that creek in the bottom of that swimming hole. There's no way. Now, I didn't have a rope with the grapple hook on it long enough. I had one, but the rope wasn't long enough to get out to it. So I look at my son, and I think, and I'm like, well, if he stays here, I think I can do this. So I said, boy, stay right here. No matter what happens, don't go nowhere. Stay right here. I stripped down, buck naked. He's like, what are you doing, Dad? What are you doing? I'm like, I'm going to go out there and get that otter. But you got to stay right here. I said, don't worry. I know what I'm doing. I'll be back. You stay right here. He said, okay, Dad. And so I stripped down and I stepped into that water, and man, it was cold. But it wasn't as cold as the water that got me when I was a little kid. And that's the first thing that popped into my head too, was it's not as cold as it was when I was little. So, yep. I walked out there and I didn't swim. I walked as best as I could. Of course, I was floating a little bit, but I was trying to keep myself down. I just walked in, and when that water hit my chest, boy, I was having a hard time breathing. I knew I had to hurry. So I took a big breath, and then I just went down and went straight down to the otter. And I grabbed that otter in that trap, and that thing was heavy. So I just started walking. There's no way. I wasn't going to try to swim up. I didn't have the energy. I couldn't do it. I I was having a hard time. So I just held on to it like a weight or an anchor, and I just walked out of that creek. Right down on the bottom, just walked right out. And got to the bank, threw that thing down, grabbed my coat, dried off real good with my coat real quick. Put my underwear and long johns back on, got dressed. I said, come on, Bill, we got to go. So we just started walking. And then by the time we went down, checked the other, I think there was the 2 that we could see and 1 more was down a little bit, 3 traps. And walked back to where that otter was at. I was dry, I was warm, everything was good. Now I used to take a Sony cam with me on these trap lines and film my catches, you know. Way back when, I think this was before YouTube. But I just wanted to have a record of it, you know, my trap lines and stuff that I caught. Well, that day I didn't take my camera. And when we got back to the otter in my trap, my son said, Dad. I said, yeah. Too bad we didn't bring your camera. We could have videoed you doing that. I said, no, nobody wants to see me coming out of that cold water. Just looked at me. He knows what I mean now, but yeah, it wouldn't have been a good time. Oh, smoke's trying to take me out, you guys. Fire's about burnt down. But anyways, never thought that me almost freezing to death when I was a little boy would help me not freeze to death when I was older, because I learned what I was doing. Anyways, that's that story. But it happened again later. Me and a buddy of mine was running trap line, and we was in a canoe. And the front of that canoe snagged a twig, spun that canoe sideways in the current, dumped us. I hit the water first, and I was closest to the bank, so I went straight for the bank. And I grabbed that canoe, and I just dragged that canoe. It was full of water. Well, not full, but about half full. My buddy fell out. He's hanging on to the back of the canoe. Now, we've both got hip waders on and waders, chest waders. So we got to get out of that water. Our trapping packs did not fall out of the canoe. I couldn't believe that, because that thing flipped over. But as soon as it flipped over, I hit the water. I flipped it back over, grabbed it, and started heading for the bank. We got to the bank. I dragged that canoe all the way out of the creek. I just drug it all the way out. Him and everything. He's like, quit pulling it. You're dragging me. Quit. So I quit dragging it so he could stand up. He gets up. He starts taking everything off. First thing I do is I'm looking for a lighter. Lighters are wet. I'm going to build a fire, right? He's like, what are you doing, Slappy? I'm like, trying to build a fire. He said, just get your clothes off. We can't build a fire. Our lighters are wet. I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. All right, so we got to do this the old school way, right? We take everything off, man. We strip down. We wring all of our clothes out real good. Put everything back on. We still a little bit cold. Got in the canoe, started paddling, and it was about I want to say about a 4 mile, maybe a 5 mile trap line that we floated. By the time we got to the end, we was dry. It was pretty neat. But anyways, little word of advice. If you get in the water and it's cold, take it all off and wring it out and start moving. It's you know, if you got a way to build a fire, of course, I think that's the best way to do it. But if you don't, no fire, just wring it out. All right, so I hope everybody has a good night. Everybody stay safe this year, because y'all don't, might be a hectic year, y'all. Who knows what's going to happen? Planes are falling out of the sky around here. Anyways, everybody have a good night, day, evening, whatever time it is. Make it the best you can. Squash the little stuff. Keep on keeping on. Peace.